I have often been convinced that a democracy is incapable of ruling an empire. And never more so than by your change of mind today in the matter of Mytilene. Because you do not fear plots against each other in your daily lives. You treat the allies of Athens with the same blind trust. You never reflect that when you give in to their appeals or surrender to your own compassion, you put yourselves in grave danger. You will receive no thanks from your enemies for this weakness, entirely forgetting that your empire is a tyranny and your subjects disaffected conspirators whose obedience is ensured not by your suicidal concessions, but by the superiority given you by your own strength and not their loyalty. The most alarming feature in this case is the constant changing of minds with which we appear to be threatened. We seem ignorant to the fact that bad laws left unchanged are better for a city than good laws with no authority, and that unlearned loyalty is more useful than quick-witted disobedience, and that ordinary men usually manage public affairs better than their more gifted fellow citizens. These clever elites always want to appear wiser than the laws, and try to overrule every proposition brought forward, thinking that they cannot show off their wit in more important matters, and by doing so often ruin their country. But those who mistrust their own cleverness are content to be less learned than the laws, and instead of picking holes in a good speaker's arguments, they act as fair judges rather than rival athletes, and generally conduct affairs successfully. These are the men we ought to imitate, instead of letting cleverness and intellectual rivalry lead us to advise our people against our true opinions. For myself, I stand by my former opinion and am struck by astonishment at those who have proposed to reopen the case. By forcing this delay, they are working entirely in the favor of the guilty by making us, the victims, confront the offenders only after the edge of our anger has been blunted. Yet we know that when vengeance follows most closely after the wrongdoing, it delivers the most equal and fitting justice. I wonder also who would dare to argue the opposite, who would pretend to show that the crimes of our enemies are somehow good for us, and that our misfortunes are harmful to our allies. Such a man must plainly either have such overconfidence in his rhetorical capabilities as to venture to prove that what is settled is still uncertain, or he must be bribed to try to delude us by elaborate fallacies. In such political games, the state gives the rewards to others and takes all the risk itself. The persons to blame are you who are so foolish as to institute these political games, who go to see an oration as you would go to see a sight, to take facts on hearsay, judge the possibility of a plan by the wit of its advocates, and trust for the truth more the clever criticisms you hear than the actual facts you witness yourselves. You who are the easy victims of fashionable arguments, unwilling to accept established conclusions, slaves to every new paradox, scorners of the ordinary, who are eager either to speak brilliantly yourselves, or failing that, to rival those who can speak by pretending to understand their ideas by applauding every point almost before it's made, and by being as quick in catching an argument as you are slow in foreseeing its consequences. You who are asking, if I may so say, for different conditions from the ones under which we live, while barely comprehending those very conditions. You are slaves to the pleasure of the ear, and more like the audience of a performer than the council of a city. In order to prevent you from this, I proceed to show you that no state has ever harmed you as much as Mytilene. I can excuse those who revolt because they cannot endure our empire, or those who have been forced into rebellion by the enemy. But for those who possessed an island with fortifications, who could fear our enemies only by sea, who had their own force of galleys to protect them, who were independent and held in the highest regard by you. To act as these have done is not revolt, since revolt implies oppression. It is deliberate and malicious aggression, an attempt to ruin us by siding with our bitterest enemies, a worse offense than a war fought for the sake of gaining power themselves. The fate of their neighbors, who had already rebelled and had been subdued, taught them nothing. Their own prosperity could not dissuade them from recklessly courting danger. Blindly confident in the future and filled with hopes greater than their power, though not greater than their ambition, and made their decision to prefer might to right. Their attack was driven not by provocation, but by the moment which seemed favorable. The truth is that great good fortune coming suddenly and unexpectedly tends to make a people arrogant. In most cases, it is safer for a people to succeed through sound judgment than through fortune alone. For it is easier, one might say, to endure hardship than to preserve prosperity. Our mistake has been to distinguish them as we have done. Had they long ago been kept under the same control as the rest, they would never have forgotten their place. For human nature is made arrogant by indulgence, just as surely as it is kept in check by firmness. Let them now, therefore, be punished as their crimes demand, and do not, while you condemn the aristocracy, spare the people. It is certain that all attack you without distinction. Though the people could have joined us, and still now be in possession of their city. But no, they thought it safer to throw in their lot with the aristocracy and join the rebellion. Consider, therefore, if you subject to the same punishment the ally who is forced to rebel by the enemy, and him who does so by his own free choice, which of them do you think will not rebel at the slightest opportunity? When the reward for success is freedom, and failure brings no great punishment, who then would not risk rebellion? Meanwhile, we have to risk our money and our lives in battles against one state after another. If we succeed, we shall receive a ruined city, from which we can no longer draw the revenue that is the source of our strength. And if we fail, we shall have one more enemy upon our hands, and shall waste our time that should be spent fighting our existing enemies in wars with our own allies. There is therefore no hope that rhetoric can inspire, or money can buy, because no mercy is due to an offense like theirs. Their offense was not unwilling, but deliberate, and mercy is only for unwilling offenders. I therefore, now as before, persist against reversing your first decision and giving way to the three failings most fatal to empire: pity, sentiment, and indulgence. Compassion is due to those who can reciprocate the feeling, not to those who will never pity us in return, but are by nature our enemies. The orators who charm us with sentiment may find other less important arenas for their skill, rather than the place where the city pays a heavy penalty for a momentary pleasure, while they themselves receive fine praise for their fine words. And indulgence should be shown towards those who will be our friends in the future, not to those who will remain what they are, our enemies. To sum up shortly, I say that if you follow my advice, you will do what is just towards the Mytileans, and at the same time is best for your own interests. Whereas if you decide otherwise, you will not so much pass judgment on them as on yourselves. For if they were right in rebelling, then you must have been wrong in ruling. However, whether right or wrong, if you determine to rule, you must follow through on that principle and punish them as your interests require. Otherwise, you must abandon your empire and cultivate honesty without danger.
Make up your minds, therefore, to repay them in kind, and do not let those who escaped the plot be more insensible than the conspirators who hatched it, but reflect what they would have done if victorious over you, especially since they were the aggressors. Since it is those who wrong their neighbors without cause that pursue their victim to destruction, fearing the danger of letting an enemy survive, for the victim of malicious injury, if he escapes, becomes more dangerous than an ordinary enemy. Do not, therefore, betray yourselves, but recall as vividly as you can the moment of your suffering and the supreme importance which you then attached to subduing them. And now pay them back in their turn, without yielding to present weakness, or forgetting the danger that once hung over you. Punish them as they deserve, and make a clear example to your other allies that the penalty of rebellion is death. Let them understand this, and you will not have to neglect your real enemies while you are fighting your own allies.